Remember, we have precious human life, but it's short and uncertain in length, and death is coming unless we devote ourselves to Dharma practice. When we die, we have little chance to avoid being reborn and again in samsara. So, generating determination to always remember the Dharma, remember your understanding of dependent arising. Even though we're sitting here and it appears like we really exist inherently, it's just a delusional appearance to the mind that clings to this solid appearance of things existing the way they appear. And so it is for the same delusion that affects all sentient beings, leading them to be trapped by karmic obscurations, anger and desire. And so remembering that all these beings have been our mothers in our infinite previous lives, and remembering their infinite kindness, how all of our happiness, all of our care and protection came from all those mothers, and even in this life, so much happiness comes from others, generating love and compassion and a strong determination to take the responsibility to lead them to enlightenment, and realizing that unless we become enlightened, we can't truly be of benefit to them. So, generating that wish to fully remove all of our negative obscurations and develop all positive qualities. We do our practice together, do the meditation. So, just feeling your body on the chair, noticing the vibration of energy in your body, the breath rising and falling. Five senses and the mind sense constantly sending data to our brain, but there's nothing solid in any of that, nothing fixed or permanent or substantial. So just focusing on that momentariness, not getting caught in daydreams or stuck in feelings. The body has its discomfort, but even that rises and falls moment to moment. Just resting in that spacious awareness, the impermanence and emptiness. So we were talking about bare attention and clear comprehension. And so those are two aspects of mindfulness that go with all the four foundations of mindfulness. Um, so I thought I'd just talk a little bit more about them, because they're interrelated, really important aspects of mindfulness meditation. Um, so, bare attention is defined as a clear and single minded awareness of what actually happens to us and in us at the successive moments of perception. It's called bare because it attends just to the bare facts of perception as presented either through the five physical senses or through the mind, and not reacting to them by deed, speech, or by mental comment, which may be one of self reference, like, dislike, judgment, reflection. So it gives us a chance to push the pause button on our habitual reactivity and our overlays of interpreting events through the samsaric filtering of the deluded mind. So, learning to cultivate bare attention slows down our tendency to respond quickly. This is particularly relevant in communication. For example, um, for me, like on social media, um, which I'm trying to cut down on, but it's sometimes useful to connect with people, but it can easily hook you in. So we might see something or hear something that's provocative or that repels us, disgusts us or makes us excited, and the tendency of the untrained mind is to feel an urge to respond immediately, to say something, to weigh in on the debate, to set someone straight. But with bare attention, we train ourselves just to register the sensations. Maybe it's a visual or an auditory sensation. And, we just notice, okay, there's hearing, there's seeing, it's arising, and then it passes away. And we just kind of practice restraining from the knee jerk response. And this really gives wisdom a chance to intervene and consider the advantages of remaining silent, not wasting time on situations which may only be a distraction to one's practice, or worse, when we respond from that habitual place, it brings karmic obstacles. We get entangled in situations that, you know, stimulate the disturbing attitudes even more. You know, we may even have to deal with, in extreme cases, how, I mean, all kinds of problems can ensue, um, nowadays. So look before you leap, as the saying goes. Oh, here's another quote about bare attention. Bare attention is concerned only with the present. It teaches what so many have forgotten, to live with full awareness in the here and now. It teaches us to face the present without trying to escape into thoughts about the past or future. Past and future are for average consciousness not objects of observation. As a Buddha can directly perceive past and future, but we just reflect on past and future. And in ordinary consciousness, the past and future are taken but rarely as objects of truly wise reflection, but are mostly just objects of daydreaming and vain imaginings, which are the main foes of right mindfulness, right understanding, and right action. How much energy has been wasted by useless thoughts of the past, by longing idly for bygone days, by vain regrets and repentance, and by the senseless and garrulous repetition in word or thought of all the banalities of the past. This is um, Neonapan, Neona, how do I say his name? His Neon, ne, Thera, who wrote The Heart of Buddhist Meditation. It's written about 50 years ago, so, and I don't think English is his first language, so sometimes I don't know, maybe he's relying on a thesaurus, but anyways, that's just my mind picking apart what's really a beautiful um, reflection for us. How we get stuck in past and future, and um, really are never in the present moment. I mean, to the extent that our mind is just jumping around monkey mind, or either leaning into the next moment. Okay, I have to do this, this, and this, and this to get through my day. Or, we're mulling over what's already happened in the day, and, interactions we've had with people, or, going back to, big events of our life. And, um, but freedom is found only in the present moment. Freedom and liberation and enlightenment. Um, so this doesn't mean that for those of us not living a monastic life or on retreat that we shouldn't study history or plan for the future. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be involved in social or environmental activism. Um, even at one point, I remember the Dalai Lama said, we should get involved in climate activism because uh, scientists are 99% in agreement that we're in a climate crisis. I mean, it's been really hot and dry in Seattle, and all my plants are dying, and I just went and watered all my trees today. But um, and so we need to think about these things, not just because the the lives of so many beings depends on a stable climate. And as Buddhists, if we have compassion for them, you know it's like this problem is not going to solve itself and without some sort of wise intervention. And so we have to think about it. And this is the challenge of mindfulness. It's like I was saying at the beginning of the meeting, just setting up for the meeting is a challenge to stay present and to remember, um, to be in my body and to be aware of all the different sense perceptions at the six sense doors, and not just be um, stuck in problem solving mode, uh, trying to figure out technology. Um, yeah, and I was just thinking again about I think a lot about it. The climate, and nobody really knows what's going to happen. Scientists say we have 10 years to reduce our emissions by 50%, and they have to go to zero by 2050. And, so there's a lot of, uh, you can get swept up into a sense of urgency and fear, agitation, excitement, um, and so it's part of this challenge of having a balanced practice of being engaged in the present moment, but also realizing that as Buddhists, you know, um, our main job, kind of is to develop our bodhicitta and our understanding of emptiness, and to cultivate the six perfections and renunciation for samsara and attachment towards this life, eliminating the eight worldly concerns, attachment for pleasure, gain, fame, and praise, aversion for pain, loss, bad reputation, and blame, developing perfect ethics, recognizing the certainty of death. So all these points of the Lam Rim, it's um, that's really our task at hand, if we want to uh, actualize the fruit of liberation and enlightenment. Um, However, we can be doing all of that and also just being mindful. Um, a lot of times during our day, we're doing a repetitive task. Walking around the house from one place to another, or doing the dishes, uh, weeding the garden, taking out the trash, and when we're doing those things, like I was just saying, oftentimes we're doing one thing and thinking about the next thing we're doing, um, and it's just like a habit of some sort of fear or boredom of just being present with simple tasks. The naked truth of our existence, being in a body that gets sick, old, and dies. That's one of the, I think, the real hooks is, especially for for a lot of us who are getting older. It's mindfulness of the body comes first, and it's challenging to be mindful, fully mindful of the body, because generally it's um, there's always aches and pains, and um, new problems, physical problems popping up. But just problem is another overlay of the mind. That's a judgment, a reflection, and stepping back from that, uh, and just being in the experience itself is where we find peace. And you know, um, with some practice, we don't need to keep the mind so busy. It's uh, the mind can be more relaxed. Um, bare attention gives us the opportunity to name the hindrances. For example, in the contemplation of mind, we know when anger, greed, lust, pride, jealousy, fear, and so forth are present. We can pause and just lightly note the presence of these emotions, and then investigate their nature. They are impermanent, have a nature of suffering or unsatisfactoriness, and they have no final concrete essence. So this is how we transform obstacles in the path. Sometimes one obstacle can come up and really, um, we can get hooked by it and just spin out on sort of depression, feeling kind of um, like really disappointed with ourselves. But instead, we just notice, oh, there's one of the hindrances. Oh, not a big deal. I've uh, I'm not enlightened yet. Big surprise. um, so and in this way, bare attention helps to develop vipassana or insight, which is the ultimate method for realizing emptiness. Um, and my bare attention of sounds just made me realize I have to step away for 10 seconds and turn down the pressure cooker. I will be right back. Um, any thoughts or questions about bare attention? Let's see. Did I do the? Okay. Um, so the second aspect of mindfulness is clear comprehension. The second aspect of right mindfulness. Um, and just as a little footnote here, on October 27th, Venerable Children is going to give a talk, which won't be on Zoom, but it'll be recorded, um, on the difference between mindfulness, Buddhist mindfulness, and secular mindfulness. So when we talk about mindfulness, we're not. I mean, it's useful for uh, mundane worldly goals, but ultimately, if for it to be really right mindfulness, it needs to be integrated with the Dharma practice based on ethics and three higher trainings, determination to be free, and um, some understanding of emptiness, I think. So, anyways, clear comprehension, whereas bare attention helps to develop clarity of perception and learning to view experience without extra layers of judgment or self referencing, just having a real sensitive and dispassionate receptivity to stimuli at the various sense doors. Clear comprehension essentially adds a layer of Dharma wisdom to the bare registering. So it enables skillful action in accordance with the Dharma. And Niyana, Ni, Nyanapana. Can you just hold up that book? I want to. I'm like Nyanaponika Thera. That's right. Um, I think he must be a Thai practitioner or Burmese. Um, but he mentions four kinds of clear comprehension. So there's clear comprehension of purpose, and so that's essentially contemplating whether the activity one is engaging in of body, speech, and mind, is it aligned with your purpose? What is your purpose? Is it a worldly purpose or is it a dharma purpose? Is it beneficial or is it motivated by one of the disturbing attitudes. So it's important to ask yourself before acting, what's my purpose here? What am I hoping to achieve? Am I just acting out a habit, or is there a higher purpose here? Is it helping to grow my dharma understanding, or fulfilling a dharma purpose? And then the second is the clear comprehension of suitability, which is basically skillful action that takes into account the full scope of the situation, the time, the place, and the mental predispositions of those involved. It seems like there's some overlap with these um, terms, but and then the third is called the clear comprehension of the domain of meditation, remembering to integrate daily activities into Dharma practice at all times, whether whether that simply be the practice of mindfulness or focusing on other meditations on the Lam Rim. The aim here is to merge Dharma practice with daily life and not have them as separate activities. Shantideva writes in one of, I think maybe it's the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, how can the practice of mindfulness be performed under these very circumstances? He's posing this question to all of us. And the last form of clear comprehension is clear comprehension of reality, is the clarity and presence of knowledge that in or behind the functions performed by the first three modes of clear comprehension, there is no abiding personality, self, ego, soul, or any such substance. As we practice the four mindfulnesses, we try as much as we are able to remember emptiness. Any thoughts, questions? Yeah. Yeah. Um, I love watching storm waves, and so I found this webcam of Nova Scotia this morning. I grew up in Maine, and to have a hurricane in that part of the world is a big deal, and I just got absorbed in watching these waves. It wasn't the kind of webcam where it was like still pictures. It was like a movie for like a half an hour of these giant waves that were going over the top of a lighthouse, and and then I was like, oh, but I have to mop the kitchen floor, which I didn't get to because there's never enough time. But and then for a moment there was like a sense of drudgery, like, oh, I'd rather just be out at the seashore watching waves. But and I realized, okay, well, I can just mop the kitchen floor and watch the waves in my mind and have a joyous attitude, and remember the stories about monks who got enlightened while they were sweeping the temple floor, and uh, yeah. Oh, putting Dharma practice into daily life is how we actually live and teach what we have learned, comprehend. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we can study and read um, But unless we've practiced, it's just intellectual knowledge. I think it was one of the translators in Dharamsala at the Tibetan library would, that was like 20 years ago, they would joke about how everybody carries a laptop nowadays, and you can have so much dharma stored on your laptop, but have you actually uh, integrated the dharma into your mind? um, okay. S- yes, yes, exactly. Thank you, Sherry. That's exactly. Just sort of some random side notes here. So there's this Pali term called papancha, which I've heard several times from insight meditation teachers and teachers in the Theravada tradition. And it means something like the proliferations, obsessions, and illusions of the world. And I think there's a similarity with the in the Lam Rim. It talks about um, in the context of the perfection of joyous effort. There's the laziness of being busy. Um, our minds can get lazily busy, just being obsessed with papancha. Um, and worldly beings tend to delight in keeping busy. We overschedule ourselves. We join too many clubs and boards and steering committees and groups, non-drama groups, of course, to the point where there's really not much space for bare attention on what is directly in front of us. The challenge to our practice can be aided by the fourth aspect of clear comprehension, which is to always be aware that whatever action we are taking, whatever our situation and surroundings, we observe things within the perspective of emptiness so that we don't get ensnared in the nets of self referencing. We do our work in the world without hopes or fears, thoughts of results, or any deluded attitude. In doing so, we actually end up being better at our work with greater success. Most of the action in the world of an unliberated mind is simply the creation of more bondage, more contaminated karma. So, so four objects of mindfulness are discussed: body, feeling, mind, and mental contents, or dharmas. Dharmas with a small d. Dharma, when it's used in that context, it just means phenomena. What is so? Here's another quote from Nyanaponika Therika. What is to be mastered, transformed, or transcended has first to be known and understood. So, basically, the four objects of mindfulness encompass all internal and external phenomena of the universe. Um, and another little footnote here is that there's an important distinction between how to practice mindfulness during a meditative session versus how to practice between sessions. Um, I don't know that's. I'll just leave that there because it's what to say about that. I mean, there's a lot to reflect on. I think the basic point is there's a lot to reflect on in the Satipatthana Sutra. Um, all the different objects of mindfulness. But in a formal meditation session, usually we have a more refined goal of what we're meditating on, and not just sort of um, randomly thinking. We may start out at the beginning of our meditation session being aware of a lot of different aspects of our experience, but um, generally, uh, you know, f- we may only have 20 minutes or 30 minutes to do our meditation, and so it's important to try to focus the mind and get below the surface of just jumping around and noticing things superficially, and uh, trying to gain insight basically into three um, the three natures of existence. Impermanence, especially impermanence and emptiness. I think in a meditation, where you're trying to develop insight. Um, so the text of the sutra reads, "Thus he," could be she or they nowadays. "Thus he dwells, contemplating the body internally in himself." Well, internally, in parentheses, in himself. Externally, which means contemplating the body in others, and both internally and externally. So, why do you think the Buddha tells us to contemplate internally, then externally, and then internally and externally? Any ideas? So, psychologically, it's sometimes easier to recognize things in others before we recognize them in ourselves. Um, so, um, yeah, just um, I think what I'll do here in a minute is I'll just read the sutra. It'll take like a little while, maybe 20 minutes or so, but it goes through all the all the different meditations of the four foundations. Um, but the other thing I'm thinking of too is when we contemplate the body, um, uh, it can help to in others when we contemplate the body of others. Um, well, helps us to understand, develop our compassion because we're not just thinking about ourselves, basically, um, and helps us think about how to lead them towards liberation and enlightenment. However, during insight practice, vipassana, we only, like I was saying before, we only focus on internal objects available to direct experience. We don't think about um, we don't think about others during insight practice. We don't think about anything. We just observe and try to see reality. Um, okay, yeah. Why don't I just pause here and I'll come back to my notes a bit later. But so here in the middle length discourses of the Buddha, a new translation of the Majjhima Nikaya. Uh, this is one of the sutras that mentions the Satipatthana Sutra. So I'll just read through it, and I might pause here and there because there's a few some of the language is a little you have to um, unpack some of the terminology. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living in the Kuru country at a town of the Kurus named Kamasadama. There he addressed the bhikkhus thus: Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, they replied, the Blessed One said this: Bhikkhus, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and grief, for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of nibbana, namely, the four foundations of mindfulness. What are the four? Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu, which is a monk, abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating feelings as feelings, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind as mind, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind objects as mind objects, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. So just a little commentary. There's a repetition there, of contemplating the body as the body, feelings as feelings. So it's just really emphasizing that it's just that itself. There's nothing else added. Just that thing, that foundation. So then we go into more detail in the contemplation of the body. First, we is mindfulness of breathing. And how, bhikkhus, does a bhikkhu abide contemplating the body as a body? Here a bhikkhu gone to the forest or to the root of a tree or to an empty hut sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, set his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him. Ever mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he understands, I breathe in long. Or breathing in short, or breathing in, oh, sorry. Breathing in long, he understands, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he understands, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he understands, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he understands, I breathe out short. He trains thus: I shall breathe in, experiencing the whole body of breath. He trains thus: I shall breathe out, experiencing the whole body of breath. He trains thus: I shall breathe in, tranquilizing the bodily formation. He trains thus: I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the body formation. Just as a skilled turner or his apprentice, when making a long turn, understands, I make a long turn, or when making a short turn, understands, I make a short turn. So too, breathing in long, a bhikkhu understands, I breathe in long. He trains thus: I shall breathe out, tranquilizing the bodily formation. Oh, yeah. So, just again, in breath meditation and in Buddhist meditation, it's important not to confuse ideas about yoga or certain uh, forms of breathing, like retention of breath. It's just allowing your breath to be completely natural, not forcing it to adhere to any particular pattern, but just allowing your body to breathe in whatever way it needs to breathe. It knows what it needs, and mindfulness just observes the breath without controlling it. And um, I don't know, just as an aside too, when you do this breath meditation, uh, it can be interesting to contemplate. This breath is all that separates me from death. Because we're breathing in and out, and that's basically what keeps us alive. Is our breath. So it's like it kind of hyper focuses, and this immediacy of, like, I'm alive in this moment. Wow, I'm breathing. And B, I'm right next to the precipice of death. Any if I breathe out and I don't breathe in again, things are going to unwind really quickly. Okay, so we're still on mindfulness of breathing, and verse 5. In this way, he abides contemplating the body as a body internally, or he abides contemplating the body as a body externally, or he abides contemplating the body as a body both internally and externally, or else he abides contemplating in the body its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in the body its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in the body both its arising and vanishing factors, or else mindfulness that there is a body is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and mindfulness, and he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. And then the second meditation in the body is the four postures. Again, bhikkhus, when walking, a bhikkhu understands I am walking. When standing, he understands I am standing. When sitting, he understands I am sitting. When lying down, he understands I am lying down. Or he understands accordingly, however his body is disposed. And comment here on walking, when I am, where was I? Yeah, the bhikkhu understands I am walking. Sometimes that's glossed as going, I mean, uh, there are many ways we travel nowadays, but it's the point is to understand the body moving through space. In this way, he abides contemplating the body as a body internally, externally, and both internally and externally. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. Again, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu is one who acts in full awareness when going forward and returning, who acts in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away, who acts in full awareness when flexing and extending his limbs, who acts in full awareness when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, who acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food, and tasting, who acts in full awareness when defecating and urinating, who acts in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. In this way, he abides contemplating the body as a body, internally, externally, and both internally and externally, and he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. So he abides independent. I mean, we can get a little tripped up here in our thinking because, on the other hand, everything is interdependent. So what does it mean when he abides independent? Um, I think it's just independent of the disturbing attitudes and all the commentary in the mind, and the need to engage in worldly attitudes. I think that's what is being referred to when we're talking about independent here. Again, so then the next verse is about meditation on foulness. This is an old translation. The bodily parts. Again, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu reviews this same body up from the soles of the feet and down from the top of the hair, bounded by skin, as full of many kinds of impurity. Thus, in this body there are head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, large intestine, small intestine, contents of the stomach, feces, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, spittle, snot, oil of the joints, and urine, just as though there were a bag with an opening at both ends full of many sorts of grain, such as hill rice, red rice, beans, peas, millet, and white rice, and a man with good eyes were to open it and review it thus: this is hill rice, this is red rice, these are beans, these are peas, this is millet, this is white rice. So too a bhikkhu reviews this same body as full of many kinds of impurity thus: in this body there are head hairs and urine, and so forth. So again, it's like this dispassionate awareness that views our own body kind of just like a puppet, and not um, with judgments and sort of self-referencing and disgust. And um, in this way, he abides contemplating the body as a body, internally, externally, and both internally and externally, and he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a bhikkhu abides, contemplating the body as a body. And then the next meditation is on the elements. Again, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu reviews this same body, however it is placed, however disposed, as consisting of elements. Thus, in this body there are the earth element, the water element, the fire element, and the air element. Just as though a skilled butcher or his apprentice had killed a cow and was seated at the crossroads with it cut up into pieces, so too a bhikkhu reviews this same body as consisting of elements. Thus, in this body there are the earth element, the water element, the fire element, and the air element. In this way he abides, contemplating the body as a body, internally, externally, and both internally and externally, and he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a bhikkhu abides, contemplating the body as a body. And then come the 9 charnel ground contemplations. So charnel ground is burial ground in ancient times. Um, the bodies of criminals and were just cut up and left out in charnel grounds for dogs and wild animals to eat. And actually, once in Varanasi, I witnessed somebody's body being burned, and you could see the body all wrapped in cloth, and um, it was very sobering just to see that body there. I suppose the same, a similar experience of being at a funeral and an open casket funeral. Again, bhikkhus, as though he were to see a corpse thrown aside in a charnel ground, 1, 2, or 3 days dead, bloated, livid, and oozing matter. A bhikkhu compares this same body with it thus. This body too is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that fate. In this way he abides contemplating the body as a body, internally, externally, and both internally and externally. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. Again, as though he were to see a corpse thrown aside in a charnel ground, being devoured by crows, hawks, vultures, dogs, jackals, or various kinds of worms, a bhikkhu compares this same body with it thus. This body too is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that fate. That too is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. Again, as though he were to see a corpse thrown aside in a charnel ground, a skeleton with flesh and blood, held together with sinews, a fleshless skeleton smeared with blood, held together with sinews, a skeleton without flesh and blood, held together with sinews, disconnected bones scattered in all directions, here a hand bone, there a foot bone, here a shin bone, there a thigh bone, here a hip bone, there a backbone, here a rib bone, there a breastbone, here an arm bone, there a shoulder bone, here a neck bone, there a jaw bone, here a tooth, there the skull. A bhikkhu compares this same body with it thus. This body too is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that fate. That too is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. Again, as though he were to see a corpse thrown aside in a charnel ground, bones bleached white, the color of shells, bones heaped up more than a year old, bones rotted and crumbled to dust. A bhikkhu compares this same body with it thus. This body too is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that fate. In this way he abides contemplating the body as a body internally, or he abides contemplating the body as a body externally, or he abides contemplating the body as a body both internally and externally, or else he abides contemplating in the body its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in the body its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in the body both its arising and vanishing factors, or else mindfulness that there is a body is simply established in him to the extent necessary for bare knowledge and mindfulness, and he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That too is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body. So I'll stop there, um, and not do the other contemplations on feeling, mind, and mind objects yet, because it's a lot to read. Um, and I just one other comment. In the West, we really have a serious culture of denial of death. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of that, Julie, working in hospitals, and we um, even at funerals, the corpses are embalmed and made to look like they're sort of right there, um, and dressed up and excuse me. So it's really behooves us as practitioners to try to peek behind the curtain that's often drawn close to in our culture, that prevents us from really honestly and soberly examining death. Um, any thoughts? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, just kind of on a mundane level, there's the um, well, I mean, it has a dharma aspect, but in the mindfulness of body postures, um, we use that both to try to gain insight into reality, the impermanence of the body and suffering and emptiness, but also just um, it can benefit us in this life because, as an acupuncturist, I see so many people who suffer injury from lack of awareness of their posture and poor sitting posture, um, and posture really reveals a lot about people. Sometimes you'll be in conversation with somebody and they'll just be kind of leaned over or something, and or standing off balance, and uh, it's our strength and power comes from good posture, and also that's where our energy flows and protects us from chronic injury. It's how we teach each other. In Western culture, healthcare workers most likely have the best understanding of death and the death process. Um, yeah, although Julie was just saying a lot of times in hospitals, um, it's still hidden, and um, be, you, you may not see it, even though we in healthcare we deal with the body a lot more directly than the general population. Death is still kind of hidden, unless maybe you're working in urgent care or something. Um, yeah, just I thought it was funny. Thera was talking about being aware of the body and postures, and um, it will bring an initial awareness of the impersonal nature of the body and will be conducive towards an inner alienation from it. In the course of the practice, one will come to view the postures just as unconcernedly as one views the automatic movements of a life-sized puppet. The play of the puppet's limbs will evoke a feeling of complete estrangement and even a slight amusement like that felt by an onlooker at a marionette show. By looking at the postures with such detached objectivity, the habitual identification with the body will begin to dissolve.